Welcome into the Talkin Tide podcast on the Belly Up Podcast Network. I'm Chase Goodbread, sports columnist with the Tuscaloosa News, joined as always by Travis Reier, the longtime senior analyst at BamaOnline.com. The Talkin Tide podcast available to you at Apple Podcasts or wherever you like to pick up your podcast. We're live on YouTube and Facebook as well. The Twitter feed is Talkin_Tide. You can get links to all of our podcasts just as soon as they drop with a follow on Twitter. Give us a like and a subscribe on Facebook and YouTube as well. We're going to be previewing Alabama's fall camp here this evening on a rare Monday night edition of the Talkin Tide podcast. And of course, we want to thank Peterbrook Chocolatier of Tuscaloosa, a fine sponsor who we will be talking a little bit more about later in the program. But Travis, first things first, we turn over it's basically the end of the Talkin Tide year now. We put to bed season 7, and we embark upon new seasons on this show with our annual fall camp preview. So season 8, Ep1 here tonight as we look ahead to this 2023 Alabama fall camp. What about it, Travis? Put up with each other for 8 years on this thing now.
The Ocho.
Yeah.
At Talkin Tide. No, it's been a blast, man. I can't believe it's been 8 years. Kind of like I can't believe Nick Saban is going into his 17th season at Alabama. I can't believe it's been 8 years for us. By the way, Bob Rutherford here checking in on the chat. So Bob, good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's I guess 2015 roughly would have been when the time we got this thing launched. We've been on a couple of different platforms, a couple we liked, couple not so much. Took an independent while, but banging along here and having a good time doing it. No question about it. All right, Travis. Fall camp underway. Practice begins Thursday. I believe the team kind of reconvenes and checks in on Wednesday. And of course, Sunday, 6 days from our broadcast here tonight, it'll be the return of Fan Day. We've discussed that a little bit as well. So a lot to get into, but definitely certainly the number one thing on the minds of Alabama fans entering fall camp, Travis, is who's going to play the quarterback position. Let's just go ahead and tackle that topic right out of the gate. We've seen some quarterback battles at Alabama under Nick Saban where he wouldn't say who the starter was going to be, but you kind of knew. And then there's been a couple where he wouldn't say and nobody knew. And right now, I think this is one of those races where there's just no telling. Sports books are putting odds on it, believe it or not. Giving Ty Simpson, as a matter of fact, favorite status. He's plus 105, Travis, to start against Middle Tennessee State, plus 140 for Tyler Buchner, plus 300 for Jalen Milroe, which surprised me, certainly. I wrote about that not too long ago in the Tuscaloosa News. Yeah, you know Nick Saban loves to see sports gambling, handicapping as quarterback competition, right?
Oh my goodness. You can get down on anything these days, Chase, just the way the man likes it. But yeah, it's you're right. There have been some years where okay, you had two guys, maybe AJ McCarron, Philip Sims, which in the spring of 2011, that did feel nip and tuck, but by the time they got to that season opener before Alabama went to Penn State there in week 2, you got the sense that it was pretty much AJ. That was confirmed for us up in State College. And maybe that's going to be the case this time around, except there's 3 guys legitimately in this mix. I agree with you. I don't have a great feel. If I were going to make one prediction about how this thing might unfold, it would be I kind of expect Tyler Buchner in some form or fashion to be one of the two when it comes down to that part of it. Just a feeling I have about it. But whether that's Jalen Milroe or Ty Simpson, I won't be surprised by much.
We've also seen Nick Saban split reps in a season opener at that quarterback position at times when he's not ready to come with a starter. Wouldn't shock me to see some of that against Middle Tennessee State in early September as well.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's just going to be fascinating to watch how this competition is administered. When you get a couple of preseason scrimmages, you get Middle Tennessee in week one. Realistically, how does this time frame unfold in terms of narrowing things down? Because you're going to have to. And I know Nick's talked about, different ways to do that, rotating guys, different days, pair up two of them, have the third guy working in another way. Uh, but boy, you just don't have, 25 years ago, you go three times a day in 2 a days. So,
Right.
you could get more reps in 3 days of 2 a days back in the old days than you can get in probably a week nowadays. So, again, that to me is going to be the fascinating aspect as much as anything else.
Yeah, no doubt. Me personally, I think Middle Tennessee State is probably the one and only game up front where we could see this competition kind of drag on. I realize Texas is the big game early on the schedule, but if you're Nick Saban, I don't think you want to go down to Tampa and play USF and still be juggling a couple guys. If they don't have a guy, if they're not ready to step on the gas with one guy coming out of camp, I think one game against Middle Tennessee State's probably going to be all it takes for them to pick a horse and run with it.
You hope so, because another sort of parallel that you could draw with this situation is 2015 with Cooper Bateman and Jake Coker. And that was pretty bizarre because you came out of an impressive win over Wisconsin that season in Arlington in the season opener. And you think, well, it's going to be Coker. And then you get to Ole Miss, and here's Cooper Bateman starting the game. And you kind of
Right.
had to lose a game that year to identify your starting quarterback. And Jake took it from there. They win the national championship. Where Texas comes into this is similar to Ole Miss, because like Ole Miss in 2015, you talk about offensive prowess. Chad Kelly for Ole Miss those years ago. Quinn Ewers this time around with a full stock of wide receivers and an outstanding tight end in Jatavian Sanders. Both of his offensive tackles are back. You better be ready to score some points in week two. So I don't think you want to get beyond Middle Tennessee really without having a good sense of who your guy is. But certainly if you don't, by Texas, you get into South Florida and SEC play after that, you damn well better know.
When you move away from quarterback, Travis, and you start thinking about other areas on the team that are going to be spirited competitions in camp, my mind goes certainly straight to left tackle. You're going to see a competition there, I think, between Elijah Pritchett and the freshman incoming Caden Proctor, who, of course, was available for spring practice. Inside linebacker, one area to watch. Wide receiver, another area to watch. But you can almost pick to any unit and see some stiff competition unfolding depending on how things go.
And that kind of goes back to tying into the critical nature of the quarterback position, because again, in week two, you're still going to have other areas of this football team that you're still learning about with Texas coming to town. If it were as simple as just needing a quarterback, I don't think there would be as much concern about that week two matchup. And there still would be, because Texas should be formidable regardless. But it isn't just quarterback, it is left tackle. It is, are your wide receivers ready to take another step forward? We've heard all about the talent at that position, and it is there, but the play needs to certainly be more consistent. Is the offensive line going to live up to the expectations? And then defensively, with Texas coming to town, uh, other than Kool-Aid McKinstry there in your back seven, you're going to have some questions to answer. I think Deontay Lawson, if in fact he is the every down inside linebacker, he can certainly get it done in coverage. But there's things to sort out right up the middle of that defense. And also, when you talk about the sub package roles that we both know also well are going to be a big part of all this, nickel, dime, maybe a little base, not as much as we've seen in years ago. So a lot to figure out, no doubt.
Defensively, you mentioned Deontay Lawson. That's going to be one to watch. He was out for spring, of course, recovering from some surgery. Does he end up the Mike? Does he stay at the weak side? That's something to watch for sure. You mentioned the safety spot. How does Malachi Moore do, kind of stepping into a full-time safety role? A lot of experience as a nickel / dime guy. But you get the sense that he's going to be asked to do more pre-snap, directing traffic, identifying formations, things of that nature. And whether it's Lawson or somebody else, they're gonna need somebody at the mic doing that for the front as well.
There is, and that's the concern I have for whoever that guy is, because it's one thing to run the show and to be the play caller, but then to still be able to serve as a presence post snap. It's tough when you got to make those calls and those checks. And then, oh, by the way, now we're playing football and there can't be much in the way of hesitation. You got to be able to play fast and physical. And really, whereas Henry Toa, I felt like, and Nick talked about this many times, unquestionably the guy to handle that play caller job the last couple of years, they didn't have that presence. Really. I mean, I'm talking about a legit presence in the middle of the field. Henry was good. He was productive. There's no denying that. But when you think about guys like CJ Mosley and Reuben Foster and Rolando McClain in the past, they need to get back to more of that sort of standard of play. And the safety positions, as you mentioned. I mean, Caleb Downs, if he's going to be one of those guys as a true freshman, that says a lot about his ability. It also says a lot about what Alabama's looking to replace, not only with their core safeties, but Brian Branch is a sub-package guy extraordinaire, and Malachi can certainly help in those roles too, whether it's star or money even. But I think Jalen Key coming in from UAB, I think Trey Amos coming in from Louisiana, that gives you some security there that those guys at their base levels, base positions, safety, corner, also can give you some flexibility with some other guys at safety and corner, like Malachi at safety, like Christian Story maybe at safety, or what you can do with Terry and Arnold to go along with Earl Little the second and some of these guys that they're looking to plug into those roles.
Yeah, interesting about this transfer group as opposed to maybe the last couple of years, in that it's going to tell a little bit of a tale on the staff's ability to evaluate some guys that maybe weren't sought after by all the top teams in the country, right? I mean, when Alabama brought in Toa from the transfer portal, everybody kind of knew that guy's going to get plugged in, and as productive as he was against Tennessee, there was little doubt that he was going to step in and be a pretty big production guy. I think the same thing can be said of Jahmyr Gibbs when he came in from Georgia Tech and maybe a couple others. Well, CJ DePrey, Tresman Marshall, the guys you mentioned, they had options, but nobody was. It's not like all of the Power Five was beating down their doors, and so it's definitely going to be, I think, a little bit longer feather in the cap for this Alabama coaching staff if a couple of these guys are able to come in and make a really big difference at positions of need.
And I think system and cultural crossover translation is big in all this, not just in terms of the defensive or offensive schemes that some of these guys played in, but you think about it. CJ Dupree played for Mike Locksley at Maryland, right? The ties there between Locks and Saban and Alabama. You look at Tresman Marshall coming from a Georgia system that is overseen by Kirby Smart. Even Trey Amos coming from Louisiana just a couple of years ago, Billy Napier out there at that program. So there's things that line up, and absolutely. And also, I think what the portal's done, maybe we didn't talk about it enough, is it's taken away, I think, a little bit from the secret sauce of Alabama football under Nick Saban, which has always been player development. You just can't count on guys being around for 2 or 3 years. It used to be with just the grad transfer rule available to these guys. They pretty much were going to be with you for 3 years. You were going to get 3 years out of just about every guy you wanted to get 3 years from. Now you're not seeing that as much. So the portal is having to serve in that role.
Patience is thin, and only seems to be getting thinner when it comes to
And
players wanting playing time.
advice is probably even worse that a lot of these
Right.
guys are getting.
There's no doubt about it. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, a lot of these guys that decide to leave Alabama in December when that first portal window opens, which is typically where you lose most of your numbers. A lot of those guys might not end up playing a lot of football at Alabama. There's some writing on the wall for those guys, but then you have a guy here and there like a Drew Sanders who ends up, leaving leaving a situation in Alabama where he was going to start without any question last season, decides to take his game to Arkansas, ends up being a solid draft pick and a heck of an inside linebacker for the Razorbacks. Well, Alabama could have used a little help at inside linebacker last year, as you just highlighted a few minutes ago. In another era, that would have been Drew Sanders.
It didn't sound like either that Drew hung around Tuscaloosa long enough to even hear Nick out. Nick, when he was talking about Drew Sanders at Arkansas and talking about him transitioning in there to inside linebacker or kind of a hybrid backer, Nick said, we kind of had the same thoughts about him here, but
Yeah.
but he wasn't around long enough apparently to take the meeting. So off to Arkansas he went, one and done with the Hogs, and now he's in the NFL.
Craziness, no doubt about it. All right, Travis, let's go around the SEC just a little bit when you consider, and we'll stay in the West. I mean, Georgia's going to be a prohibitive favorite in the SEC East for sure. When you look around the West, though, Travis, final year of divisional play in the league, by the way, do you see it as a race that's totally wide open, or does it more look like an LSU Alabama race to you as it was a season ago? I kind of like LSU to win the division. I think they've got the pieces to do it, but I'm not ready to say it's a 2-horse race either.
No, it shouldn't be. I mean, when you look at Texas A&M's roster, Chase, shouldn't it be a try race at least? In the West, the quarterback situation looks good with Weigman, and if it's not Weigman, Max Johnson is a veteran of SEC wars. So the wide receiver talent at Texas A&M, they've got. I think Texas A&M has 5 former 5-stars along their defensive front. And that doesn't include McKinley Jackson, who was a 4-star, who's going to start right over the football for that Aggie defense. So, no, I mean, Texas A&M should be very much in that discussion, especially when you consider that Texas A&M, not LSU, gets Alabama at home this year. LSU has to go to Tuscaloosa this time around. So, I think beyond those three, my balloting for SEC Media Days, I think I went Ole Miss 4th, Arkansas 5th, State 6th, and Auburn 7th. What about you?
I've got Auburn at the bottom of the division. I like LSU at the top. I think they've just got too much at some of the key positions not to pull it off. So if I'm handicapping it right now, LSU at the top, Auburn at the bottom. Alabama, I think the biggest challenger for the Tigers at 2, A&M 3. Kind of a mixed bag thereafter, right? I mean, you're talking about 2 of the best quarterbacks in the league and KJ Jefferson and Will Rogers that would have to figure in somewhere in that 4, 5, 6 neighborhood. And you hate to pigeonhole a couple quarterbacks like that there. But that may end up being exactly what happens, especially if Connor Weigman takes a step forward for the Aggies. And, speaking of Texas A&M, Travis, we've been talking for years now. We've been hearing, the buyout is just too big. Jimbo's safe because it's too much of a buyout to pay off. Well, every year that goes by takes a chunk off of that buyout, and I think it's still too high as he enters what I think is going to be his 6th year, if I'm not mistaken, at Texas A&M. But it's starting to come down, Travis, and I don't think the fan base there wants to hear about another 3rd or 4th place finish in the division.
No, they don't. They don't. And at A&M, they can just pass around that brass spittoon, fill it up,
Hmm.
with the cash, and do what they need to do. There's no doubt. I mean, I'm not going to say it's definitely a make or break year for Jimbo, but anything less in the regular season than 8 wins, maybe 9. And we talk so much about this thing from a conference perspective, but I think Texas A&M, Miami, down in South Florida early in the season is a big, big narrative game for both Jimbo, um, and also Cristobal. I know it's still early for Cristobal, but he needs that kind of win too going into, I guess it's year 2 for him.
Yeah, definitely some non-conference games that are going to shape things. I think the same can be said with Florida taking on Utah again at the
Ah,
top of that
geez.
Gator schedule,
I don't
right?
like
Billy
that game for
Napier.
the Gators. No, that's
No,
not. I don't like that game there.
they
No,
pulled it
not to
off
open the
last year in a
season.
tight one.
Yeah, but you're gonna go over there with Graham Mertz as your
Yeah,
quarterback.
yeah.
Now I
Ugh.
like the backs. I mean, how do you not like Florida's running backs? But they're saying Damian George is going to start at right tackle for Florida, the
Mm,
Alabama transfer. And hey, here's to Damian having a great year and and being exactly what Florida needs him to be. But I think Billy Napier can get it done at Florida. Can he get it done at the level that's going to appease Gator fans, especially the kind that you and I know?
right.
I don't know if that's possible by any coach.
Spurrier
Uh,
Gators. The
yeah, the
Spurrier
Spurrier
Gators.
Gators, fun and gun Gators. But I like Billy Napier, I really do, and I think he does have a big picture plan. But boy, it's tough being a program builder in 2023. People ain't got time. They don't typically give you time for that.
They want to see it fast. The Talkin
Yeah.
Tide podcast on the Belly Up Podcast Network. Moving on, going to thank Peterbrook Chocolatier of Tuscaloosa really quickly. Travis, tell us more about him.
Peterbrook Chocolatier right there at 1530 McFarland Boulevard North in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa. Got some rough news. The month of July has come to an end. So the free gelato in July promotion has ceased with the end of the month. Every Wednesday in the month of July on an annual basis, you can go by Peterbrook Chocolatier at 1530 McFarland Boulevard North and get that free scoop of gelato. But fear not, still so many great reasons to swing by Peterbrook. That chocolate bin carousel right there in the middle of the store, whether you want those dark chocolate espresso beans, chocolate almonds, dark chocolate covered cranberries. Boy, those dark chocolate malt balls. You'll never eat another Whoppers or whatever it is if you go by Peterbrook Chocolatier and try those. Do it today, 1530 McFarland Boulevard North in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa. It is Peterbrook Chocolatier.
Was just in there about 3 or 4 days ago and said hello to Caitlin and dipped into those corporate reward points of mine. Travis walked out with a sack of Peterbrook, burned 26 points, and I think Caitlin told me I had more than 100 left to go. So
Wow.
I'm going to try to pace myself, but I can do a lot
Yeah.
of damage in there right now with those reward points.
Yeah, those rewards points are all the rage now and everything, all the rave. And but I can't think of a better place to have that type of stockpile than Peterbrook.
No doubt about it. All right, the Talkin Tide podcast on the Belly Up Podcast Network. Moving on, Travis, a few more minutes to go here in the program. We spent much of the first segment talking about question marks on this Alabama team as they enter fall camp. What about strengths, Travis? Let's hit on that really quickly. Unit wise, offense, defense, special teams. If you could point to one unit and say Alabama can lean on this group, where would it be in your opinion?
Well, I like the interior of the offensive line, and I'll tie that in with the backfield. Give me those running backs. JC Latham too at the one tackle spot. But I think that offensive line marrying with that running back position and also the quarterback position giving something on designed runs, I think we're going to see. So I guess I'm pointing to the run game. but I would start with the running backs for sure. It kind of feels like Jace McClellan's being undervalued. Are you picking up on that? I mean, obviously Justice Haynes, all the rage in the spring
Yeah,
and the
maybe a little bit.
expectation, but Jace, it
Right.
kind of feels like he's being undersold a little bit as a veteran back.
I think part of the reason for that is that production wise, people are used to seeing Alabama with a Najee Harris, a Damian Harris, somebody with 1,000-yard season or two in the books and coming back. I mean, we've
Yeah.
seen we've seen the torch passed from back to back in this program with guys that have posted monster seasons. McClellan, very talented guy. He's also shared a lot of carries, certainly with Jahmyr Gibbs last year. I think Gibbs led the team, and McClellan was second on the team in rushing. But you know what? And of course, prior to that, it was Brian Robinson taking the monster share of the carries, Travis. But yeah, I hear you. Maybe he is a little bit under regarded entering the season.
He's second team
And
preseason All SEC though, I guess. So he did get some love
yeah,
at SEC media days, but I think you hit on it though. He's had some injuries too. He's had some struggles staying on the field the last couple of seasons, so you got to take that into account, I guess, too.
he has. Strengths for me. You know, I'm a Terrion Arnold guy, and I'm not sure everybody is. I think he's got a lot of upside, and I think I expect him to be a better football player. He was a little bit up and down last season, especially early in the year. But if Terrion Arnold kind of steps forward the way I think he will, combined with Kool-Aid McKinstry, I like what I see from Alabama with those two guys at outside corner. Um, I think the backfield's going to be solid, like you said. I think the interior of the offensive line brings a lot back, as you mentioned as well. Looking around, though, I think just about anywhere you want to point to, there's at least one area where you're scratching your head a little bit, saying what are they going to be like? Is it, safety, inside line? Is there going to be a dominant defensive tackle? Maybe not, right? That's another area to watch for. Offensive tackle, one to watch. The wide receivers need to be better than last year, no question. The tight end position loses Cam Latu and is facing some turnover as well. So it's going to be an interesting fall camp and to see where these guys shake out in the two deep. If we even get, Nick Saban, by the way, Travis, if you remember last year when he handed out the depth chart on Depth Chart Monday, he warned everybody. He said, this might be the last year y'all get one. So who knows if we will even know on Depth Chart Monday if the depth chart will be.
No, they'll tie that into the collective too. Only if you sign up for Yay Alabama,
right.
Chase, will you get a depth chart.
Yeah.
I may have sealed our fate right there with that comment, but it is what it is.
A lot of fun. All right. We're going to take a dip in the Too Deep Tumbler before we get out of here on the Talkin Tide podcast. See who comes out of here this time. Starting to run out of we'll take two out.
Out of Spears.
And we'll see
who we got.
We got. All right, number 30.
I feel like I'm in Philadelphia, Mississippi. All right, yeah, 30.
Jahad Campbell comes out number 30, and we're also getting number 2, which is a dual number. The aforementioned Jace McClellan and Caleb Downs. We talked on. We'll start with that number 2. McClellan, we already touched on pretty heavily, but what about Caleb Downs, Travis? You mentioned him earlier. Definitely an opportunity to step forward and play a lot of football for a young guy at the safety position. We've seen some of these stud safeties come in and play more special teams than not. Play more special teams than defense as freshmen, and then it's the sophomore year where you see a lot of these guys jump in and start playing a lot of defense at that spot. Might not be the case with Caleb Downs. I mean, when you look at the spring that he had, you listen to Nick Saban talk about him as a guy who brings not only the intangibles, but certainly more than enough athletic ability and skill and size, etc. Caleb Downs may play more football on defense as a true freshman than just about anybody you can name that's come through, Travis.
Yeah, even more than Minka in 2015. And Minka played a lot. I mean, he played that star position as a young player. Uh, and it coincides, to be sure, with some critical departures. I mean, you lose Jordan Battle, you lose DeMarco Helms. You can throw Brian Branch into that too as a core safety. So the window's there. There's no doubt about it. And it is the transfer portal era. So there's more movement than there's been ever before. But still, Nick's not going to put someone out there if he's worried about them busting or blowing coverages or not getting calls or being able to make those checks too. And so that probably impresses me as much as anything about Caleb Downs's rapid ascent, even as a 5-star prospect coming into UA back in January. You still got a lot to process and coordinate from with that safety position. And look, he's another guy when you talk about sub package roles. I'm sure physically he can handle those as well. You just wonder though, if you're Nick Saban, you're that defensive staff, how much do you really want to put on Caleb Downs? I mean, you need an every down safety. So if he's that guy, if he's your base safety to go along with a Malachi Moore, then that's the guy that's the spot where you're probably trying to get him ready the most. You've got some options at star. Obviously, Earl Little the second comes to mind. Malachi can play there. But yeah, I mean, by all accounts, Caleb Downs ready to go.
All right, real quick on Jihad Campbell, the inside linebacker. Travis, we saw Nick Saban bring in not only Tresman Marshall out of the portal, but also Justin Jefferson from the JUCO ranks. And so that speaks to a need right there that this coaching staff wants somebody that they can just plug straight in. So competition for sure for Campbell and others at that inside linebacker spot coming in. It's going to be fun to see how that shakes out.
Yeah, and Jihad looks like he's made some nice physical gains in that first year in the program. So I think that was a bit of the quest for him early on to get to a point physically, where he could play between the tackles, do everything that's required physically, still, even in this era of offensive football, at that position. And yeah, he's right there in that mix. And as we know, if you're a top 3 guy at inside linebacker, there's a good chance you're going to have a role of some type.
It's going to do it for this edition of the Talkin Tide podcast. Travis and I will be back once again, probably Sunday night next week, coming off a fan day, maybe Monday night. We'll see how it goes as we'll continue to cover Alabama football fall camp 2023. For Travis Reier of BamaOnline.com, I'm Chase Goodbread of the Tuscaloosa News and Crimson Cover Television, and we'll talk to you next time here on Talkin Tide.